Hello, everyone. I'm Tracy Ariely, end of life doula and founder of Comforting Closure. Today's episode is part of a special series where we're exploring how different cultures and religions honor and remember their deceased loved ones. It's a journey that invites reflection and respect and helps us understand that grief and remembrance are a universal experience. We have a very special guest with us today, Sharon Knight, an initiate in the Anderson Feri tradition of witchcraft. Sharon will guide us through an enriching discussion about Samhain, a holiday that is significant in her tradition and its profound connection to ancestral veneration and the end of life journey. Sharon, thank you so much for being here today. I'd like to start off by talking about the roots of the Anderson Feri tradition. When we spoke about that previously, I found it really interesting that you said that the Anderson Feri tradition has some of its roots in the Scots, Gaelic, and Appalachian traditions. Can you tell us a little bit more about that connection?
Sure. So the Anderson Feri tradition was founded by Victor and Cora Anderson. And Victor Anderson, from what I was told anyway, I was not trained by Victor. I was trained by one of his students. But my understanding is that Victor was initiated into a coven in Oregon. And later he married Cora, who was from the southern regions of America, and she inherited, as part of her own family lineage, a lot of the Scotch Irish and Scotch Gaelic folk traditions that a lot of people in the South just have as part of their family traditions. So it's a combination of both Victor and Cora's magical path that created the Anderson Feri tradition. And it's considered an American witchcraft tradition in that it's similar to British traditional witchcraft, such as Gardnerian, for example, but it does have some distinct differences as well.
And how did you become involved?
Well, ever since I was a child, always have felt like there's more going on than people are letting on, and there's all this stuff around and nobody's talking about it, and I didn't know what that was. But when I was 18, I saw an advertisement in a spiritual magazine at a natural food store where I was working for classes in Anderson Feri Tradition witchcraft, and I just knew, everything in my being went, I want to do that. And so I did that. And my fellow natural grocery store employees teased me all the time about going to witch school. But I did that when I was 18 and I've never looked back. It really is a good fit. And at this point, I would say that, the Anderson Feri tradition was my entrance into overall paganism. But that what I practice now is a much more eclectic and broad collection of practices than just Anderson Feri.
I know there's a difference between pagan and Wiccan. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. So paganism is basically an umbrella term for a lot of different traditions practicing pre-Christian religion, basically. Whereas Wiccan is a very specific branch that refers to British traditional witchcraft, which Gerald Gardner, it now appears Gerald Gardner pretty much made up Wicca, which I personally don't have a problem with. Basically, people make religion. I mean, we're the ones who make religion anyway, as a means of understanding what is the universe and what is our place in the universe, and is this universe sentient?
Yep.
That's my understanding of what all religion is grappling with.
Yeah. In terms of gender roles within the tradition, you mentioned when we spoke before that in your tradition, they're pretty fluid. How does it compare to other pagan practices?
This is one of the things that I really like about the fairy tradition in particular, and it is very similar to British traditional witchcraft It's often referred to as American traditional witchcraft because it originated in America. But in Gardnerian and Alexandrian traditions, the gender roles are very specific. They want a woman to be the high priestess, and they want a man to be the high priest, and polarity of male and female energy is very important to get the right chemistry, and their deities are a goddess and a god, and there are no genderqueer deities within that tradition, although many of us know there definitely are genderqueer deities in every culture. And I grew up a tomboy. I would not necessarily say I'm personally genderqueer, but I grew up enough of a tomboy that I didn't want to be assigned to girly girl roles. So it was very easy for me to understand that, of course, we have male and female in us, all of us. And so why should it be so rigid? And that's something I really liked about the fairy tradition, is that they don't have that. They do acknowledge genderqueer deities, and they don't require a high priest to be a man and a high priestess to be a woman. In fact, they pretty much refer to themselves all as priests without gender. You know, if you're a priest of the craft, you're a priest, whether you're male or female or any sort of gender binary all along the gender spectrum. And I love that about the fairy tradition, and still do, and did since day one.
So let's talk about Samhain. Can you start by giving us an overview of what it is and why it's so important?
Yes, I'd be glad to. So Samhain is an Irish pre-Christian holiday that honors the dead, and it's where we get Halloween, basically. So it is believed that this time of year, the veils between our world and the realm of the dead and the spirit world at large are the thinnest, and so it's possible to commune with our beloved dead most easily at this time. And for a lot of us, myself definitely, we came into these traditions trying to find our own ancestral heritage. So a lot of us are very much drawn to Irish and Scots pre-Christian religion. And we're trying to revive this sense of connection to our lineage for ourselves. A lot of people who become drawn to these practices are very sensitive to subtle energies. And so we feel like we've found our people when we find other people who sense these things, that you can feel it with the turn from summer to winter. You know, fall itself could be seen as a liminal period, as could spring, because it's the transition between the harshness of winter and the warmth of summer.
When you said that at this time, the veil is at its thinnest, so people can take and really feel the spirit world and feel our ancestors. Are there certain types of rituals that can help people connect to their loved ones?
Yeah, definitely. So one thing I'd love to interject here is that even though there are many different branches of paganism and practice within the big tent of paganism, you know, there are devotional polytheists, which are probably the most religious of all of us, all the way to atheopagans who don't believe in any type of gods or spirits, but believe that the earth is worth honoring. What does tie most of these different paths under big tent paganism together is a spirit of animism. We all see the world as inspirited, and so this veil being the thinnest basically allows for us to communicate back and forth with the spirit world. We definitely do believe that our world is inspirited, and that there are different modes of perception that allow us to see things and presences and patterns of being that we have been trained out of as we are taught how to be an adult in our society. So the rituals around Samhain because it is so important to maintain these connections and to learn from our ancestors, we want to take advantage of this time to commune with our beloved dead while the veils are thinnest. And so we structure our rituals in a way that, we have an opening of the gate that, depending on the tradition, will very often involve specific deities involved in that tradition as sort of the guiding, big pattern of consciousness that oversees and protects. And then we lay out pictures of our dead on a big altar or a small altar if it's a small group. And it's pretty simple, really. We will make offerings to them based on what did grandma love? What was grandma's favorite cookie? What did she love knitting? We might put some knitting needles out for grandma or Uncle Joe or the initiator in our spiritual tradition. And we treat them as minor deities, with making them offerings. And they have, ideally, if our ancestors are good people, worth honoring and learning from, they have a more vast vantage point now because they've gone beyond the veil. So this gives us a chance to commune. We'll often have a feast with them. It's called a dumb supper, where we will eat a meal in silence with our dead and offer them a portion of the meal. And we'll do this in large communities as well as small groups or among families or even solo. I'll do a solo Samhain every year where I have the opportunity to talk to my father. And it's a really wonderful way of not only soothing the grief because they're not lost to us forever, but it's a way of healing things that you may not have had an opportunity to say something to an estranged brother, and then they die and you never get a chance to heal that. And that can be a great source of pain for us. But through these traditions, we can continue to communicate with our dead because, part of believing in a spirit world and experiencing these different modes of perception. I mean, it's not just a belief, it's an experience that we have that this is a real thing. Of course, they're not lost to us. Energy doesn't just disappear, it just transforms into something else. So what if they transformed into, and how can I stay connected to them?
I love that because so many people, that is a huge part of grieving and healing is inviting that person or that being back into your life and still having that sense of communication and that sense of presence in your life, that person just hasn't gone away. It's just a different type of relationship. The relationship has shifted. How do you feel that the practices of Samhain and these rituals really help people come to terms with their own mortality?
This is one of the things I love about witchcraft communities is they do not shy away from death. And we all have to own that our time on this earth is finite. And that's part of why it's such a beautiful gift, is we only get 80 or 100 years if we're lucky, And our culture is woefully underprepared. There's really very little in terms of what our society offers to help us come to terms with the fact that we are going to die and cease to exist, and our body is going to crumble and rot in the ground, the end. And it's part of our regular practice. We take this on as part of why life is worth celebrating and honoring and why it's a gift. And we can learn to not fear death, especially if, you come to believe, ideally, if a religion is serving you well, you come to believe because you experience profound things. You don't believe because you're told to believe. you believe because your practice has shown you. So we don't believe death is the end. We believe that our spirit does go on in some form or another. In some way, our consciousness continues on, or it dissolves and reforms into a tree. I mean, that's also okay. Or it dissolves and becomes part of the ocean. This is all okay with us. We're not necessarily attached. I don't have to be Sharon Knight, exactly this person, for eternal. It doesn't have to be eternal, my existence. And as I see it, the worst thing that's going to happen is that I'm going to be wrong about this, and I'll just be dead, and consciousness ceases totally, and then I won't know any different.
How does someone from your community prepare? I know that we've spoken about preparation, how, death preparation, and especially being in the field I'm in. I already have everything spelled out. I know what music I want played. I know what books I want to be read as, I'm assuming that I'll probably die of either old age, a terminal illness, or, so I have everything kind of spelled out, right? How is that viewed, or how does it happen within your community?
For many in our community, it is also handled very proactively, which I appreciate. Everybody listening, you should do this. Don't leave a mess for your family. Take care of your paperwork. That's the most basic. But also plan ahead. Take care of what you want done for yourself. Don't be in denial and thus have nothing but fear to hold you at the time of your death. So how we do it in our traditions, and I'm speaking specifically of my closest community now, because there is a lot of nuance depending on the group. But how we do it is, for one, everyone's very proactive. People do tend to devote themselves to a specific deity throughout their lives, so they will often want to go into the body of that deity. And when I say deity, I think of gods and goddesses as patterns of consciousness. Just like we are, a bunch of different atoms and cells and bits of thing working together to facilitate the consciousness that is us. The gods also have this same type of patterning, that they've gathered together the stuff of consciousness, but it's in a much more vast beingness. And those beings have symbols and structures that we can use to connect with them. And this is part of how our devotional practices work. And so a lot of people will want to go into the body or the temple of the deity that they have devoted their lives to. And that can be built ahead of time. We become very good at seeing with the third eye. It's a way that we have meditation practices of things that we do so that we can more easily perceive into the spirit world. So we may have built in our mind's eye a temple that can receive our spirit body as it disengages from our flesh at the moment of death. And so this is a way that many of us will prepare. Is within our tradition, we will build a temple that has the symbols of the space or the being that we want to be delivered to, while we sort out whatever's next. So, ideally you have that set up ahead of time, and you tell your closest people that you want to be with you as you're passing. You tell them these things ahead of time so they can prepare it for you. And you tell them what songs you want, and they'll either be sung to you, or it'll be, if you want a song by a specific band, it'll be played for you. We love singing with our real voices to help our dead transfer over into the spirit world. And a lot of people love that. They love specific incense. We just map it out very precisely, and then we give them exactly what they've asked for.
Nice. Children, how do children participate in Samhain? Is there a particular way the festival helps educate our younger generation about death and ancestors?
Yes, yes. So I should say first that I don't personally have children. So there are probably people who could answer this more precisely than I. But what I have seen is children are very much invited to participate in Samhain activities. It's kept light. Um, you don't necessarily want to blow a child's mind open with the spirit world or anything like that. But you do want them to know that they can still speak to grandma. They can still speak to Uncle Joe. They can play cards with Uncle Joe. This is a night where we cast a circle and put ourselves in between the worlds so that we can talk with Uncle Joe. And maybe we'll play Uncle Joe's favorite card game. Maybe we'll give Uncle Joe his favorite beer. Maybe we'll set out some knitting needles for Grandma because she loved to knit. And we just give them a chance to say hi. So often the rituals that we do for families will be more lighthearted. They won't necessarily, it's hard to really explain how the intensity is controlled, but it is, because we learn this as part of working energy, working subtle energy currents. So we are able to keep it light just by what pattern we bring to the experience that children are having with us. And that might be different than what we do in community. And that might be different than what we do just for ourselves.
I think many religions, like I was raised Jewish, so I know that even in the Jewish religion, how until a child is 13 and all of a sudden they're an adult, there are different rituals or different things rules that they have to follow. So it is much lighter as a child. So what are some common misconceptions about Samhain or about paganism that you would like to clarify for our audience?
Oh boy, that's a whole podcast in
Yeah,
itself.
yes, it is.
First of all, people who call themselves witches are far less scary than many seem to think. We're not going to eat your children. We're not going to curse your cattle. We're not going to let loose a bunch of demons onto the plane of Earth. We are basically practicing. We are ancestor venerators insofar as our ancestors are worthy of veneration. We tend to have a strong commitment to personal responsibility and responsibility for taking care of the planet, taking care of each other, because it's not only our ancestors that we seek to learn from. We're going to die ourselves someday. We want to be good ancestors ourselves. So we think in terms of the descendants and what are we leaving for our descendants. So there's really, you don't hurt us and we're not going to hurt you. We're just doing our thing. We don't proselytize. We don't try to convert anybody. We're just living and letting live, and we'd like others to do the same. And if something sounds outlandish about pagans or people who aren't Christian, it probably is outlandish. If it sounds ridiculous, it probably is. And another thing, black cats are not bad luck. Please don't hurt them at Halloween or any other
Thank you.
time of the year. I love the kitties.
Yes, thank you. Do you have any recommendations for books or resources or communities that people can get involved with to educate themselves or to even become involved with the community?
Yes, and I had to think about this one for a little bit because I've been in this for so long. I just have my groups and we do what we do. And I realized, wow, I have to look some of this up to see who's even offering, your first step in kind of things. But what I did find out is Laura Tempest Zakroff and Jason Mankey are both pagan authors through Llewellyn, and they both recommended a website called mandragoramagica.com, which I've posted the spelling in the chat. And this is a listing of groups based on state and region. And you can just look through it. There's a bunch of Wiccan groups. There are, I think, a few polytheist groups that are based on specific cultures, like Hellenic polytheism or Celtic polytheism are both pretty well represented. Hecatean is a group I saw for devotees of the goddess Hecate. So yeah, that's a good place to start, to find a group in your area, and they have protocols for how to approach the group right on their website. You might also consider looking up your local pagan pride group. Many areas do have pagan pride organizations. Also, see if you can find a metaphysical bookshop in your area. The term metaphysical is used a lot because metaphysical spans a variety of different spiritual traditions using, third eye, psychic type modes of perception, of which witchcraft is just one. And also because metaphysical seems to scare people less than witch store.
Or occult.
Right. Which all occult means is the hidden. It's the hidden worlds. It's the inner realms that we access through the imagination. Which, by the way, it's not in the imagination only. It is accessed through the imagination. There's a big difference there. So the actual field of magic we refer to as the imaginal to separate it from the imaginary. But I digress. So your local metaphysical bookshop, these places are often cultural center points for paganism and witchcraft traditions. And and even Unitarian churches will often have a pagan branch. You can see if they have, it's called CUPS, which I think stands for Covenant of Unitarian Universalist Pagans. And there you'll get a very light, safe place to dip your toes in introduction. It's a perfect introduction. And I say safe because we are dealing with the spirit world, and that can become intense, and it's why we do train ourselves to perceive and to contain and to protect. There are reasons for all of that. But if the person is well trained, which quite a lot of people are well trained, so I'm not trying to freak anybody out, but people are well trained enough to be able to give a light introduction in, I'd say, most cases. I'm not sure you'll get that on TikTok, but you might. But someone who's committed enough to run a store or to be the head of a pagan pride organization is probably pretty committed to the practices and the trainings.
So I know we're at the bottom of the hour now. Is there anything else you would like the audience to know? And how can people find you if they want to get a hold of you?
Oh, okay. There's that. Right. Is there anything else I want to add? I guess I would just say, don't be afraid of us. We're regular people like you. We have to pay our bills, and, we get sick and we have to go to the bathroom, and and we're generally friendly. If folks are friendly to us, we are friendly to them. We care very much about the planet. We care very much about interrelationships with one another. So we're probably going to be kind and want the best for you. And how you can find me specifically, my website is Sharon at SharonKnight.net. I am, or at least I have been, I'm kind of changing careers right now, but for the last many years of my adult life, I've been a professional musician. So that's mostly what my website is about. But yeah, come visit me, send me an email, say hi on Facebook if you want. I'm very friendly.
Thank you. Thank you so much for
My
being here
pleasure.
today and talking, being open, and so willing to share. Thank you. For those of you who are looking for more resources or insights or support in the end of life journey, come and visit me on my website, comfortingclosure.com, or connect with me personally. And thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you have any questions, please comment below or reach out to me directly. And if you found this video to be helpful, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.